Hi guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. Now today, pretty exciting video because we are gonna be talking about my favorite 15 debut albums of all time, leaving 5 honorable mentions just before the last album I'm gonna talk about. So stay tuned till the very end of the video. Now, the interesting thing about this series of albums I'm gonna talk about is that they span over 7 decades of music, and I swear I didn't make this on purpose, it just came out that way. So there's gonna be albums from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, 2010s, and 2020s. And these genres span from rock to pop to metal, but mainly they're gonna be focused on rock and metal. Also, I'm going to be showing them chronologically. So from the first one that was released to the last one that was released. So we're going to start in the 60s and end in the 2020s. Also, I'm going to be rating these albums, giving them a score out of 5. Now, of course, these are all albums I absolutely love, so they're going to have high scores. But I like some more than others, and I have some few minor flaws with some of them. So, like, they're not gonna be all 5 stars, I guarantee you. So, without further ado, let's get on with the video. First album I'm gonna show you in the list is the first one that came out in chronological order, and this is Pink Floyd's Piper at the Gates of Dawn, released in 1967, first album of the band. An album, as you know, led by the genius of Syd Barrett, and this album sounds quite different compared to the Pink Floyd we know, compared to the Gilmore years. This is absolutely driven by the schizophrenic genius of Syd Barrett. This album is very psychedelic. It talks about scarecrows, gnomes, a mouse named Gerald, a bike which you can ride if you like. But there are also some glimpses of Pink Floyd that would eventually be in songs like Astronomy Domain or Interstellar Overdrive. This album to me sounds like the Beatles on acid, and it's an incredible debut album, but I think that Pink Floyd will only get better after this, despite this being such a phenomenal record. And so, for that reason, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 stars. Okay, we're gonna stay in the 60s for this second choice, and this one goes to the legendary debut album from King Crimson, In the Court of a Crimson King, with this iconic artwork. One of the most influential records of all time, probably the first time that the word progressive rock was used for an album, and this record influenced generations upon generations. I love the haunted and atmospheric vibes that this album has, and because aside from the 21st Century Schizoid Man, the opening track, this album is actually pretty chill, and there isn't that much of that virtuosity in the music. That being said, this is a gorgeous piece of work. The song Moonchild meanders a little bit too much in the second part. I love the melody to the initial part of the song. But then when you go to that instrumental section, I think it meanders a little bit. My favorite song here is the title track, but through and through, this album is a masterpiece. It's incredible, and my favorite King Crimson album ever. But, just for that final section of Moonchild, I'm gonna give this a 4.5 out of 5. So, stepping into the 70s for this next pick, and this is another one of the most iconic cover artworks of all time, of the most iconic debut albums of all time, of the most influential debut albums of all time. I mean, this probably created the whole metal genre, and I love the dark atmosphere of this album, how brooding and sinister it is, how doomy it is, but at the same time it's folky, and it's psychedelic and experimental. I mean, look at a song like The Wizard, for instance. I mean, the whole first half of this album is just stellar. I think that maybe it dips a little bit in quality in the second half, and I think that Black Sabbath have made better albums after this, but this is an incredible piece of work. But just for that latter half, which isn't perfect, I'm gonna give this a 4 stars out of 5. Delving into the 80s with this next album, and precisely in the year 1980, where the legendary debut album by Iron Maiden was released. A total masterpiece of heavy metal combined with that punk attitude, also providing some bluesy and warmer and fuzzier guitar moments by former guitarist of the band, Dennis Stratton, who eventually left the band. Yeah, this has some of the best Maiden songs there ever, for instance, Phantom of the Opera. But I do agree with Steve Harris on the production side. Steve was never really satisfied the way this record turned out from a merely productional point of view. And I feel that, yeah, he's right. An album like Killers sounds way better, especially in the bass tone and how groovy the bass sounds on Killers, and how the guitars are way more upfront. But that is just a minor complaint for an album which is an absolute classic of the heavy metal history. But I feel Maiden will only improve with the albums that follow. So I'm giving this a very strong 4.5 out of 5. So we're gonna stay in the 80s for my next pick, precisely in the year 1987, with a debut album by Guns N' Roses, Appetite for Destruction, such a game-changing album, such a sleazy, hard-hitting album through and through, with some iconic songs. It's basically a best-of compilation, almost, because, I mean, it's got so many of the great hits by Guns N' Roses. And to be honest, at this stage of my life, I'm not that much into that type of sound, that hard rock / glam metal sound. I prefer other things, but if there's one exception to that rule, it's this album. Because you can't deny the greatness of these compositions, how influential they were. Even to me, I mean, most of these songs I learned how to play on guitar, and Slash influenced me personally so much as a guitar player. But yeah, this album is just perfect through and through, and for this reason, I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. Stepping into the 90s, and precisely in the year 1994, where one of my favorite bands of all times released their seminal debut album. I'm talking about the gothic black metal band Cradle of Filth, with The Principle of Evil Made Flesh. And this is such an unrelentless and unpolished and unfiltered album with such a raw production, but at the same time, it's haunting, it's beautiful, it's elegant. It's got those spoken word sections which are absolutely magnificent. It's got some of the best compositions the band have ever put out, and I'm talking about the title track, The Forest Whispers My Name, Black Goddess Rises, Summer Dying Fast. My only issue with this album isn't the production, but it's Danny Filth's vocals. I believe that in the subsequent albums, he is gonna learn a lot more and become a more varied vocalist with a lot more range, a lot more dynamics, and he's gonna become so much more theatrical in his style. And I think you can hear it if in, like, for example, the re-recording of Black Goddess Rises, how his voice is way more theatrical in some spoken word parts compared to the rawness of this album. But anyways, this album is incredible. I'm not gonna spoil if it's one of my top favorite Cradle of Filth albums, because I'm gonna do a ranking on Cradle of Filth, and it's gonna come real soon. So if you're a fan of a band, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. Let's say in 1994, with the album that probably paved the way for a rise of nu metal, and I'm talking about Korn's iconic self-titled album. And this is such a dark, twisted, demented, and disturbing album. The production is raw. Jonathan Davis sounds completely insane. Such a unique sound to this album. No one sounds like Korn, and to me, with their debut album, Korn already reached their peak of their discography. Some of my favorite cuts here are the opener Blind, with that "Are You Ready?" that almost warns the listener for the rise of a new current of music. And of course, the close of Daddy, which is very, very disturbing and emotional, and talks about all the traumas that Jonathan Davis faced as a little boy or as a teenager while he was growing up. And this album feels very genuine, feels very real, feels very cathartic. I remember listening to this album when I was 15 years old and feeling this is the craziest music and the most unpolished music I have ever witnessed in my life. Yes, yet it sounds so real and so authentic. And this is a band that is absolutely unique. Korn, self-titled. Let's go in the year 1999 with another iconic debut album, this time by Slipknot, an album that broke the market at the time when it came out. Again, it's a very unique sounding album, and this is one of the definitive albums that shaped me as a music listener when I was a teenager. I didn't discover it back in 1999 because I was a little bit too young back then, but around the beginning of the 2000s, this album is one of the albums that completely changed my view on music. And I mean, 9 members playing this crazy mix of stream metal with some catchy hooks and these crazy percussions, and this is just great. Just the first half has some of the best Slipknot songs ever. And I have to say that the version that is, for me, the definite version of this album is the one with the song Purity on it that was removed later on and then reintroduced because of some issues they had with the content of the song. Yeah, but I mean, this is unrelenting, brutal. Corey Taylor sounds incredible. Joy Jordison on drums sounds incredible. Fantastic debut album by Slipknot. Okay, so with these last few albums, I forgot to mention the rating, even though I did leave it on the screen. And this one, I'm gonna focus on that too. And the next one is another very, very influential album for me as a teenager. It's again one of the albums, if not the albums, that opened my mind to what I really loved about music. And we're talking about debut album by Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory, released in 2000. This is an album that 24 years later, to me, still gives me goosebumps. It's perfect from beginning to end. It's got that mashup of hip hop and metal and electronic infused parts and DJs and scratching. And it's another album where you could consider it basically a best of, because each song is an absolute masterpiece. I could not pick a bad or mediocre or even an okay track on this album. This is just incredible from start to finish, and it's hard for me even to pick favorites. This was groundbreaking for me. It was groundbreaking for the industry. It sold more than 30 million copies, something absolutely unheard of even at the time. Yeah, so Linkin Park, Hybrid Theory, this is perfect. And I'm going to give this album a 5 out of 5. Okay, maybe you might not expect this one, but again, this next album is one that was highly influential for my teenage years. And I'm talking about Avril Lavigne's Let Go, her debut album of 2002, highly successful, that spawned so many incredible singles, Skater Boy, Complicated, I'm With You. But I mean, this album is really good through and through, and her lyrics, I feel are very mature, and I feel this is ironically the most mature record by Avril Lavigne in terms of lyrics, even though she was so young at the time. In this album, she reflects on the importance of self-worth and standing up for yourself, not changing yourself for anybody else. She wants to live her life at her fullest, and she reflects on how sometimes it's pain is better than apathy. And so she'd rather have a painful experience and something that would leave a negative mark on herself and that would shake her in some way, even in a negative way, rather than living in apathy. And this comes across in the song Anything But Ordinary. But Avril Lavigne doesn't just look forward, she looks back at her past in a song like My World, and how she grew up in this little town in Canada, and how she will always be rooted to that little town that was called Nepani, if I'm not mistaken. And then the idea of having someone you really love looking at you and feeling so vulnerable. So I feel this album has some really compelling lyrics, even though it was only written by a teenager. And I feel that overall, this is Avril's strongest album, even stronger than her sophomore effort, Under My Skin. And many people would disagree to that, but yeah, 20 years later, I feel that this album maybe has a few spots where the songwriting goes a little bit downhill, like on the song Too Much to Ask or Tomorrow. I remember as a teenager, I loved this album through and through. I still do, but I do now recognize some of its faults and some of the songwriting isn't always stellar, and for that reason, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. Still a really, really fantastic album. Okay, I recognize that I'm saying this sentence way too much, but what can I say? Um, this is again one of the most influential albums that got me into music, and we are talking of the period early 2000s, and that was when I was a teenager. So of course, many of these albums will have a highly emotional connection for me, and this one is Evanescence with their debut album Fallen. Again, a massive, massive hit. 17 million copies sold. And this album, I feel, is a masterpiece through and through. And I did a whole video on Evanescence, their influence they had on the music scene. I ranked all their albums, including Origin. So if you're interested, go check it out in the link in the description below. Yeah, I mean, I love the gothic elements of this album. I love the atmospheres. Amy Lee's voice is, I mean, you can't even describe it. It's more than incredible. The singles are incredible. The deep cuts are incredible. This is one of the albums that, there isn't a bad song on it. Every song is at least a 9 out of 10 for me. And you have some tender, really striking and emotional moments like Hello, which is one of my favorite cuts on the record. I mean, yeah, what can I say? This is an easy 5 out of 5 stars for me. An incredible record. Okay, changing completely genre. And this is kind of a debut album because it's wintersun's album, Wintersun. And I mean, it's kind of a debut album because, yeah, the project, it was a new one. But Yari Maenpa, as you know, it was the founder and lyric writer and songwriter for the band Ensiferum, and he released 2 albums with Ensiferum. So this project, yes, was brand new, but Yani Maenpa, I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing him wrong, was already an experienced musician. Anyway, I'm gonna count this as a debut album because, in fact, it is the debut album of Wintersun, and it's such a unique sounding album. I don't know how to call it. I mean, it's a combination of power metal, of symphonic black metal, of melodic death metal. So many things combining this amazing soundscape, which has such an emotional vibe to it, and kind of a melancholic vibe to it, like most Finnish bands actually do. And there are some really hard hitting songs, and there are some incredibly virtuosic moments. I love the sweet picking in Death and the Healing. That part is incredible. Every song here is an absolute masterpiece. And I know that Wintersun is finally releasing a new album this year, Time 2, after only 12 years from the first part, and I'm so, so excited to hear Time 2. It's like my most anticipated record of the year, easily, easily. So this, I mean, I have to give this a 5 out of 5. It's a perfect record. It's one of the greatest debut albums of all time. It's just perfect from start to finish. Check out this band if you don't know Wintersun, but I guess you do. Okay, changing completely genre. We now have my favorite pop album of all time, and this is the debut album by Lana Del Rey, Born to Die, released in 2012, and this is a Paradise edition, so it includes her EP Paradise, and I have it also behind me. Look, on vinyl. But anyways, yeah, this album was very, very important to me because I didn't discover it back into 2012. I know lots of people were talking about it, but at the time I was very, very deep into metal and only listening to metal. But maybe 5 years later, I really fell in love with this, and this opened my mind to a whole new plethora of artists in the pop world. Stuff like Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo, Billie Eilish, Ariana Grande, Owl City, and my appreciation for pop, which I had lost. I loved pop when I was a kid and an early teenager, but then I kind of lost the love I had for the genre, I feel, for quite a few years. But this album reconnected me with the world of pop music and made me discover so many other artists. And this is still, to me, my favorite Lana Del Rey record, even though Norman fucking Rockwell is so freaking close. And because it's perfect. It's a perfect pop album, my favorite album of all time. 5 out of 5 stars, easily, no questions. Shifting completely the genre, and we're passing from pop to atmospheric black metal, and this is the debut album from Caladan Brood, Echoes of Battle, released in 2013, and sadly their only album to this day. I think the band disbanded, I'm not quite sure. It's so sad, but I remember in 2013 that this album made a huge buzz amongst the metal community. And it's such an incredibly atmospheric, brooding, dark, epic album. It's similar in the vein of a band like Summoning. So if you like Summoning, you might want to check it out. It's incredibly grandiose, very emotional, some folky passages from straight black metal passages. And yeah, what can I say? I am so sad that this band didn't release a sophomore album, because this is honestly a masterpiece and one of my favorite black metal albums of all time. I mean, not just in atmospheric black metal, but in black metal in general. Unfortunately, this album is not on Spotify, but you can check it out on YouTube. And I really recommend the song Book of the Fallen. I think it's one of the best songs on the album. This is, of course, a concept album, fantasy based. It's kind of as if you're thrown in the middle of The Lord of the Rings, even though the concept is not from The Lord of the Rings. It's another author, which I can't name. I don't really remember. But anyway, Caladan Brood, Echoes of Battle, incredible album. All right, we're in the 2020s, and this is the last pick. But before I mention it, I'm gonna tell you 5 honorable mentions, because I mean there are so many incredible debut albums. It was very hard to narrow it down to 15, so I feel I have to at least mention another 5, and that is Metallica with Kill 'Em All, Pain of Salvation with Entropia, Arion with The Final Experiment, Sonata Arctica with Ecliptica. We gotta have some power metal, and I mean Ecliptica is peak power metal. And then a symphonic band from the Netherlands, D-Lane, with their debut album, Lucidity, released in 2006. So we can go on with my last pick, and is the year now, 2021 now, and the album is, maybe you saw it in the thumbnail, Spiritbox, Eternal Blue, and a band that just blew me away and continues to blow me away in everything they put out. They just put out this record up till now, but they do have quite a few EPs, including The Fear of Fear, which was released last year and was absolutely incredible. This band blends metalcore with the typical metalcore breakdowns, but with a more like pop-induced sound at times, with a lot of electronic passages. They fuse styles so well, and they have one of the greatest, if not the greatest, vocalist in metal right now, at least to me, in Courtney LaPlante. She's got such an incredibly emotional, clean voice, and such a brutal and incredible, harsh vocals. And I just saw them recently with Architects, and I also made a video about it. So if you want to, I'll link it in the description. They are a great band live, man, and this album is just, yeah, this album to me reminds me a little bit of Hybrid Theory in how game changing was back in 2021. I mean, not that it reached that level of sales, of course, but you know, this is just incredible from start to finish. There isn't a bad track on it. Circle with Me is incredible. Constant is so emotional. There are some straight up brutal bangers like Holy Roller, which is a straight metalcore song, which is actually the song that started the hype with Spiritbox. So yeah, I mean, has become one of my favorite albums of all time. So not just one of my favorite debut albums of all time, but one of my favorite albums of all time. So it's an easy 5 out of 5 stars for me. Just incredible. And so with that, we have concluded this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. It would really benefit. And yeah, check out the other videos I told you about, the Evanescence ranking and the video about the Spiritbox Architects live show. And without further ado, see you in the next video, and thanks for watching.